Greater Lafayette and Tippecanoe County business and community leaders are in Washington, D.C. this week discussing the area's future with policymakers. It's the second day of the annual Greater Lafayette Commerce trip to the nation's capital.
News 18's Dan Klein has been traveling with the group, and he joins us now live from Washington with more. Dan.
Yeah, today was all about meeting with the various senators and representatives who represent the Greater Lafayette area, and with me now is one of those, Senator Joe Donnelly. Joe, thanks for joining us. And what are your thoughts about the significant things that may happen this year, both in the Senate and the House, that would be passed as legislation?
Well, we're very much hoping to continue economic growth, job growth, and for unemployment to come down. And it was very important for all the leaders from Tippecanoe County, Warren County, Carroll County to come out and talk to us, and we could go over economic plans for the year ahead.
One of the themes that's come out in this last week and today as well was transportation. What kind of efforts forward do you think we'll see in the transportation front?
Well, I met with the Lafayette City Bus folks a few days ago, and then again with the chamber today. And what I think we'll see is that a transportation bill will be put together, and the framework will be there, and it will pass either this year or next, and it will likely be a 5-year bill. So we'll have transportation certainty for the next 5 years.
Well, and the big problem on the transportation front is just gas taxes. Not enough money to fund all the things that need to happen. What do you think, where will the extra funding come from?
Well, that's where the effort is being made now, is to try to match up funding sources. They had talked about possible royalties from energy development as an additional source, and so we're trying to match up the funds so that it's a revenue neutral bill and doesn't add to the deficit in any way.
And you're on the Armed Services Committee, and certainly a lot of news made within this last week with Chuck Hagel coming out saying time to lower the number of troops that are currently active down to lowest since World War II. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, what we're doing is in early 2001, the Army was at approximately 490,000 members, and then through Iraq and Afghanistan it went up to 570,000 members, and so the sizing is changing as a reflection of coming home from Iraq and coming home from Afghanistan. And what we're trying to do is also make sure that we don't put additional deficits on the shoulders of our children and grandchildren. And so we want to have a military that continues to be the most preeminent, the most effective, and the best in the world, while at the same time being able to make sure that we're also heading toward a balanced budget.
All right, Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Much.
Well, and we're not done, at least even for the News 18 at 5 o'clock. In just a few minutes, I'll be interviewing Senator Dan Coates. For now, they're reporting live in Washington, D.C., Dan Klein, News 18.
As we reported earlier in the newscast, Greater Lafayette and Tippecanoe County leaders were in Washington, D.C. as part of Greater Lafayette Commerce's annual trip there.
News 18's Dan Klein is in Washington covering the trip and joins us now live with another report. Dan.
Well, Gina, it's from one senator to the other. With me now is Senator Dan Coates. Senator, thanks for joining us today. What are your thoughts about what can happen legislative-wise moving forward before November's election?
Well, an election year, it's tough to move legislation, particularly if the majority party, in this case Harry Reid, doesn't want to put his members with tough votes. And so it's been frustrating not to be able to move more forward, because we have real challenges that we need to do and can do on a bipartisan basis. Now, one thing we can do is repeal the medical device tax. We've got 34 Democrats and 45 Republicans. That's 79 out of 100 in support of that. That impacts northern Indiana in particular, because we're one of the medical device capitals of the United States. And this is a tax that has been imposed on these companies that is keeping them from expanding and keeping them from hiring more people. The other thing we can do is work together on infrastructure. I think there's bipartisan support for infrastructure. Both mayors were here with the Lafayette group, and they talked about old pipes and roads that need to be repaired and bridges that need to be repaired. And so we talked about some innovative and creative ways to provide funding for some of that infrastructure.
What do you think the tough part is paying for? What are the ways that you would support paying for those sorts of things?
One, we want to make sure that we get back in Indiana our fair share of the money we send to Washington under the gas tax. We've been below $1 in, less than $1 out. We've moved that up closer to the $1, but we want to get our fair share back. Secondly, we need to look at public-private partnerships, because there just simply isn't enough money to go around from the federal government anymore out of the gas tax. Cars are getting more miles per gallon. That fund is dropping down. But there are ways we can use public-private partnerships, like we've done with major moves in Indiana, to address some of these infrastructure needs.
And some of it may involve bringing money in, some of the profits from other countries and overseas companies.
Well, absolutely. Major Moves was funded, as you know, by a consortium of overseas companies. It was a great benefit to Indiana in terms of building roads and getting a 75-year lease off the toll road. There are banks, there are investment groups that would like to invest in some of these kinds of things, and so working together to try to bring that as part of the funding package will allow us to go forward much sooner if we have to wait and stand in line waiting for the federal dollars to come through.
All right, Senator, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
this
you.
evening. And I tell you what, we're going to have a full wrap-up of the day's events, all local delegation tonight on News 18 at 11. Reporting live in Washington, D.C., Dan Klein, News 18.